Well, let's go ahead and get started. So today is part of our Sales Hacks training series. And today we're going to be talking about SD-WAN and selling SD-WAN. And specifically, we're going to talk about DNS intelligence. And the reason why DNS is so relevant in the SD-WAN sales conversation is in order for us to truly articulate the greatest value that SD-WAN brings to the table, we need to be able to talk about how SD-WAN optimizes the applications that these end users are using. And so unless we know what those applications are, it's hard to be able to talk about and talk to the customers about the value proposition of selling or of using SD-WAN within their organization. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to create relevant conversations so that customers can truly understand how SD-WAN helps their organization. And so DNS is essentially going to help us understand what applications they're using in order to talk specifically about those. Before we get into that, I just want to share with you an email that I received the other day from a sales professional. And basically what they said was, have you considered using SD-WAN across your network? This may be a good alternative to an MPLS or VPN solution. And that's their company name. Works with multiple SD-WAN providers and can help you navigate various options and find you the best solution for your business. I would love to jump on a phone call and tell you more about this amazing technology. So I don't mean to talk poorly about the email. I think it's actually pretty good, but I think that we can do a lot better. A lot of times these are the types of emails that we're sending out, and it's really just not resonating much with the customers that we're trying to reach. And so, again, going back to that conversation where we can talk specifically about how SD-WAN can help specific applications within their network, that's where we're going to get a lot more traction with these companies. So what is DNS? Most of you on the call already understand that, but essentially what DNS is, it stands for Domain Name System. And it's the settings for a domain in terms of email and security and IP addresses and hosting and name servers and all that good stuff. But basically it helps other applications and services know how to interact with this specific domain. And there's about 9 different types of DNS records. We're not going to talk about all of these today. We're only going to really talk about the MX records and the text records, because this is where we can glean a lot of that data about applications. What's great is today more than ever, there's so much information about which companies are using applications, because all of these technologies are being migrated into the cloud, because the cloud obviously makes it a lot easier for these to leverage better resources and have better reliability. But as more and more of these technologies move into the cloud, it's easier for us to identify using these digital footprints which companies are using which services. And so now we can kind of understand who's using what. That's really half of the battle in creating and selling SD-WAN services. A byproduct, though, of this transition and migration into the cloud is that the distance between the end user and the application is growing. So rather than having the application live within the office or on the hard drive, now the access to that application is hundreds or even thousands of miles away. And so what this does is it creates a little bit of latency, which for most people isn't a big issue. Even with MPLS, if you were to use the latency is still somewhat significant, because you're still traveling through several nodes or through the data center to access these applications, but even worse if you're traveling across the public internet. And what our SD-WAN solutions are essentially doing when we're selling SD-WAN is we're trying to create these shortcuts to these applications. And this is ultimately where I see the best opportunity for anyone to sell an SD-WAN solution, is being able to quantify the time saved when accessing these applications and how SD-WAN optimizes this connection. And so once we're able to quantify that, this is where the greatest value proposition that we can bring to the table when it comes to SD-WAN. But rather than talking about it in terms of latency, what we want to describe it as is workforce optimization. Because this verbiage and this phrasing allows us to broaden the audience of who this applies to. And so we're able to step outside of the IT department and really talk to folks about what this really means for their business. So in order to quantify the impact of using cloud applications, there's a number of tools that we can use to basically look at this. A few that I would recommend, and there's tons of these on the market, well, one of which is rescue time. Rescue time allows you to basically measure how much time individuals within an organization spend on any specific application. And so what this does is it's really a time-saving tool to help you understand how you're using your time, but it can create a really strong data set for you to help decision makers visualize the impact of cloud applications and the latency has on their business. GFI software is another great tool that you can use, which tracks clicks and allows you to also measure and gauge how employees are using different pieces of software. So if you have a good buddy or a friend or an employee or a customer that would be willing to run these software applications, which a lot of them might already be using them today, but if they're willing to share that information with you, you can create a really good data set and a story to help share this with others about the impacts that latency has within their business. As an example, let's say there was a company with 200 employees, and after performing the research, you find that they click on links in cloud applications, checking email, going through their CRM, about 5 times per minute. And this translates to about 500,000 clicks per day across the organization and about 10 million clicks per month. And if the average wait time on each of those clicks is around 2.3 seconds, which is fairly conservative, that would mean that they're waiting around 6,000 hours each month for those applications to retrieve and send information back and forth. And SD-WAN typically saves at least 40% on those wait times by optimizing the connections to those applications, which essentially translates to about 2,500 hours saved each month by utilizing an SD-WAN technology. And if we were to translate that into salary or workforce optimization, if we were to estimate maybe a $20 an hour salary rate plus overhead, we're looking at around $49,000 saved on a monthly basis from a single SD-WAN solution. So again, going back and trying to measure the impact that latency has on accessing applications in the cloud and the impact of optimizing the access to those applications across the organization, I think is where our biggest value proposition comes from. And if we take this same information and address it as a workforce optimization rather than an IT solution, we'll be able to address multiple individuals within the company, contact center folks, tech support folks, finance people. We'll be able to have conversations with multiple decision makers. And ultimately what we're trying to do is create internal advocates for the solution internally. So again, approaching it from a little bit different angle makes it a lot easier for us. Now, this whole research process can be somewhat time-consuming, and we don't want to do this for every prospect because that would significantly increase our customer acquisition cost. But what we want to do is we want to look at this data set and use this as an asset for our organization when it comes to prospecting. And so the best way to do this is if we look at other companies that have common denominators or common attributes of this company, they would be interested in the same type of data set. So imagine the competitors of this company, companies local to the area, companies within the same vertical, companies that use the same applications. And so what this basically does is if we can identify companies that are interested in the same type of data set, we can also create essentially what is called a chain reaction, where we create one data set, and then as we share that across different organizations that have those common attributes, it becomes their data set as well. So what we want to do is we want to start creating these data sets. So we use this asset, which is data, which is very valuable in the customer acquisition process, because one of the things that we have a challenge with in terms of getting the attention span of anybody in the marketplace is the fact that they can already get information anywhere about SD-WAN. But the second that we provide information that isn't already readily available across the internet by searching Google, we've, for the first time, really created value in the conversation. And that's why creating unique data sets in these research processes makes it so much easier to acquire customers, because now you're finally bringing something that they can't find on their own. And so what we want to do next is identify which companies would be ideal to share this information with. There's a number of data tools that allow us to do this. We can look up individual data, DNS information. I really like MX Toolbox. A lot of you probably have used this before, but it's a quick and easy access to raw DNS information about any company. Ensable also provides a report known as the Upsell Report, where you can go in and basically there's a technology section that will tell you everything we know about the company's technology. There's also a tool right on your computer, for those of you that are using Windows computers, called DNS Lookup, and you can perform DNS record lookups directly from there. Next up, I just wanted to show you a few examples of some of the more common DNS records that are out there. So when you're pulling these records, on the right-hand side of the applications, as you see on the screen here, like for Zoho CRM, it would be zohocrm.com, and that would show up in the DNS records indicating that this is the CRM platform that they're using. And so some of them are intuitive, some of them aren't, and sometimes you have to do a Google search to figure out what exactly does this mean. But you'll start to see these inside of the DNS records and identify what the applications that these companies are using. And so it's a good idea to kind of keep track and see what's out there. In terms of going beyond just individual records, there are some ways for us to create DNS lists. So rather than just looking up companies on an individual basis, there's some different ways for us to build lists of companies based off of a specific criteria. So there's a number of DNS tools that actually archive their DNS records for different websites, and they allow Google to spider this technology and archive it and make it searchable through Google. And so if we ask Google to search that specific website by doing site : and in this instance we're looking at dnscheckertool.com, and then we put a space, and then we would put in a keyword. So the keyword would be msgapp.com, for instance, or zendesk.com. And what that would do is it would allow us to identify websites that are using that specific DNS, or have that specific DNS record inside of their tool, and it would give you a list of results with website information. Ensable has a similar tool. I'm not trying to make this a commercial, but it's just something that you should be aware of, where you can actually filter by vertical or by industry or by geography and also technology. Now, not all technologies will show up in the DNS records, and so there are some ways for us to identify companies that are using technologies outside of the DNS records, and that's through job listings. So a lot of times they'll put in certain criteria for different individuals, whether it's IT or support, that they have to have certain experience with certain types of applications or services, and we can find that pretty easily just by searching different job postings. And so if we access these job postings via Google, which have already been spidered and archived, we can use sites like LinkedIn to search for that information. What's also nice, if Google has archived this information, we can go back several years and look at different job postings over time and see what we can find. And my recommendation is just to kind of go through this on a regular basis and kind of keep track of which companies are posting what. For instance, MTLS would be a good example. So if somebody's setting up criteria for the IT manager that their responsibility is to update router tables across the MTLS network, and this is part of the experience requirements, this would be the perfect opportunity to reach out to that company and educate them about the need to take that responsibility off of the IT manager and talk about a better solution. Or even VPN would be a good one. There's probably a dozen others that you could probably think of. This is a service that we provide automatically with Ensable using the custom keywords, which you can add to your portal, and we'll track that for you. Now that we kind of we've identified, if we've done our research and created the data set, and we've identified which companies would be relevant to share this data set and this information with, our next step is to take the Trojan horse approach. If we come at the customers from the sales angle, we'll typically automatically get turned down. It's just because the brains are hardwired to reject sales opportunities and sales offers. But if we look at this from a slightly different angle, it'll be much easier to get into the conversation with the customer. So some examples would be if we've done research about a specific company to identify latency around specific applications, and the company name is AFC Bank based out of Kansas City, then we would like to share this information and this article that we've created, this research, with their competitors or with other companies in the same market, kind of like what we talked about earlier. So examples would be, how does AFC Bank employees use their time? I guarantee you their competitors would love to know that, and that's an easy in with those companies. Or how AFC Bank reduced monthly expenses by $49,000 a month with a box. I'm sure a lot of companies in the banking industry would love to understand that. Or what a local Kansas City company did to save nearly 2,500 hours a month. I'm sure if you just mentioned the relevant geographic aspect of this, you could definitely get a lot of people's attention. Or how employees in the banking industry spend their time at work. People are really curious about that. And having that data set, again, creates an asset for you that opens a lot of great opportunities. Or which applications do employees in the Kansas City market use the most? Or case study, average time spent on Office 365 each day. And you can switch out Office 365 with any other applications that have showed up in the data set. So again, these open up a lot of opportunities because people are curious about this. And again, this is an information that they can readily find in the online. And so you create instant value when you can share this with them. Another way to take this a little bit further is you can also share this information in articles with different magazines and blogs and different places. Anytime you have information that's not necessarily just opinion related, but actually has data sets behind it, it's instantly publishable. And so this is another area where you can get a lot of great free advertising. So far today we've talked a lot about context, talking to companies about information that's relevant to them, relevant to their industry, relevant to their market, and that's one of the better ways to get attention from individuals. The second piece that's going to be important for you in lowering your customer acquisition costs and making it easier to sell SD-WAN is layering on timing elements. So timing will also make the conversation go much smoother. So what I mean by timing is there's events that are taking place that if you were aware of them, it would make it easier for you to have these conversations. So what I mean by Google Alerts, which is one of the bullet items here on the page, is Google Alerts should be tracking the specific applications. So if you're catering to the banking industry and you want to know about which app, if you research all of the applications that banking companies use, then I would track those via Google Alerts and know about, did somebody just buy that company that sells that application? Or did the application come out with a new feature? All of those timing elements are great data points to create excuses to have conversations with companies who use those applications. So in other words, understanding changes that are taking place within the specific application is important in these conversations that you're having, and it also helps you become more of an industry expert when you're having the conversations. Natural disasters, obviously this is a great excuse to deploy cloud applications because of the DR aspect of it, but also anytime new applications are deployed into the cloud, whether it's backup storage or email, this allows you to have a conversation about how to optimize that access to that application via SD-WAN. New offices, this is a great opportunity, or office moves, it's almost the same thing, but essentially not having to configure another router for another office and having to manage that whole process is a great excuse to at least experiment with SD-WAN. New applications is another way to look at this, and we'll talk a little bit about how we can identify when companies are deploying or switching applications like new CRMs or new email services. But this is an optimal moment because we want to catch it before they're getting used to the whole latency and just we don't want them to stick with the status quo. So we want to talk to them about optimizing that application before they get used to the performance of that application over time, and talk to them about how to make that performance a lot better. Also, you'll find that it's fairly difficult to get people to switch email platforms. But the moment that you mention to them that their domain has been blacklisted and their IP is blacklisted, it's an easy opportunity to talk to them about saying, you know what, this might be a good opportunity to look at a new email platform. Oh, and by the way, let's make sure that we can give you better performance when you access this platform. And so keeping track of which companies are blacklisted, which companies are not having the best email performance is a great opportunity to really talk to them about switching applications and optimizing those applications. But definitely the new applications is a good place to focus your time because that's time sensitive. If somebody just deployed Salesforce, let's make sure that they have the best access to that, and it's all part of that initial change. And so talking about SD-WAN in these instances is pretty important. Now, my recommendation is you could probably hire an intern who could take an account list that you're trying to target and just kind of keep tabs on these companies for you. So if you want to keep track of weather alerts that are taking place in those markets, or talk to them about office moves, or keeping track of blacklisted or tracking different changes within the DNS records, that would be a good opportunity to do that. There's a website called CompleteDNS.com, and what's great about this is it gives you historical data about the DNS record changes, and so you can go back several years and see, what changes have they made over time, and also keep track of any recent changes. And again, not to make this a commercial, but this is something that Ensable can do for you automatically. It's the only organization that can keep track of DNS changes and notify you about significant software implementations in real time. But again, there's a lot of different resources that are free and available and can help you visualize all the different timing elements to keep track of when there's the best opportunity to bring up the whole SD-WAN conversation and share the insights that you've gleaned from the different research reports and share this information with others to help them visualize the true impact of SD-WAN that it has on their business. So that's everything